Dom is pulled out of a quiet life off the grid with Letty and his son when he and his crew are forced to come together once again to save the world from an earth-shattering plot to take over the world once again by the most skilled and deadliest assassin and high-performance driver they have ever faced. John Cena. I'm actually kind of a fan of this franchise. I watched the entire saga of films up to that point in preparation for Furious 7. While I haven't enjoyed the entirety of the saga, I can say that I have enjoyed this franchise, particularly Fast 5, 6, and 7. The entire group of those three films might be my favorite of the franchise. I enjoyed 8, although it did feel quite unnecessary because of how Final Furious 7 felt, as well as the tragic death of Paul Walker, but I really enjoyed Hobbs and Shaw, a lot more than most people, I will admit. But after seeing that movie, I was thinking that this franchise still had something to give, you know? That, and this movie is directed by Justin Lin, who directed Fast 5 and Fast and Furious 6, which are my two favorite films in this franchise. So I had pretty high hopes for F9 or Fast 9 or Fast and Furious 9 or whatever the fuck this movie is called. There are certainly good things in this film, but I do unfortunately have quite a bit of issues with Fast 9. I think it is a massive letdown, although I don't think this film is by any means a complete and utter disaster of a film. I just didn't really enjoy it, and it pains me to say that because I enjoy this franchise, even some of the weaker ones, and I really wanted to enjoy this film, but I thought it was pretty bad. The biggest praise I can really give this movie is the directing. Justin Lin does a pretty great job helming this movie, as he did the other installments of this franchise that he has directed. Like in the other films that he's directed, his flair for over-the-top action sequences is prevalent throughout Fast 9. He is really good at crafting exciting action sequences, no matter how over-the-top those sequences get, and this movie is absolutely no exception. However, the Fast and Furious franchise has always walked a fine line with its action between suitably over-the-top and inexplicably ridiculous, and this movie just slingshots right over that line. I think this is the one where they finally did it. They finally lost me. It never feels like anyone is in danger in this movie because nothing is dangerous to these characters anymore. We know Dom isn't gonna get squished by one of the 14 billion cars that are flung across the screen, and we know the rest of the team ain't gonna go out like that. Vin Diesel will have the back of his fecking head smashed through a fecking door frame and just brush it off. A character will find themselves surrounded by bad guys with guns who rain fire upon that character, and somehow that character survives and kills all the bad guys without receiving a fecking scratch. People will be catapulted into the air and then saved when other characters catch them with their fecking cars. And the list goes on and on and on. They went to space. These characters can seemingly survive anything now, and it actually stripped the movie of any tension because the characters in this film are basically invincible. So it never feels like the characters are actually at risk at any point in the film. And because of that fundamental lack of tension, the action got pretty boring pretty quickly. How is that even possible in a movie like this? How is Fast and Furious 9 boring? That is mind-boggling to me. This film even goes out of its way to acknowledge this. The characters actually acknowledge that they're somehow unkillable at this point. There's a literal scene where characters will list all the incredible things that they have survived over the years, many without receiving a single scratch. And I get what they were trying to do. They were trying to be self-aware and tell the audience, yeah, we know what we did. Didn't really work for me though, because of the way they executed it. It felt very forced in such a way that it took me out of the movie, because it felt like they were just trying to cash in on the internet's jokes and desires for what this franchise could eventually become. They went to space. In fact, the vast majority of this film feels like that. They went to space in a space car. It really feels like everyone behind this movie went on the internet and looked through what people were joking about in terms of what could be and took it way too seriously. So much so that they actually did a lot of those things that people have been joking about them doing for years. Space. And watching those things happen really took me out of the movie. This movie is honestly a parody at times. It feels like a movie that was made to appeal to the masses, and that really ticks me off. There are even a number of forced pop culture references in there, just shoehorned in, because, I don't know, they wanted to be like, hey, we know what pop culture is. We're gonna reference it now. Even going as far as the inclusion of a conversation in which two characters insult each other using Star Wars references. Star Wars references! I mean, not that I wouldn't do that myself, but still, they went to space. in a space car. Even the characters make leaps in logic that I just can't look past. They will make connections between things they find, locations, or even events from their past, like they're going from point A straight to Z. The way the characters make these connections is just nonsensical. Like Tyrese Gibson will look at somebody's ears and deduce that that person is one of the bad guys because they fight for a living? Yeah, they turn out to be right, but that just feels lucky. And the way the characters come to these conclusions just doesn't make any sense. And it makes the overall progression of this story feel really clunky and uneven because a lot of the story relies on these characters making these connections. In fact, the whole conflict between Dom and his brother in this movie is based off one hell of a leap in logic. This movie reveals that something happened between these characters when they were kids that led to them having a horrible relationship with each other later in life. The movie reveals why Dom hates his brother, that being that he thinks his brother was responsible for whatever happened to them in the past, but his whole reasoning behind viewing his brother as the one responsible is that his brother just so happened to be the last person looking at something? That's the entire reason these two characters are at odds? Not only does it make little to no sense, but it actually makes Dom look like an asshole. So much so that I actually ended up rooting for his brother Jacob, and he's the villain. And I actually really like the idea of someone whose entire moral code is built around family, particularly the one he's built with the crew of people that he's met over the years. Having to face someone who is biologically family, but they're not willing to call that person family because of something that happened to them in the past. That's actually a cool idea, but the way this film executes that idea just feels really rushed and it doesn't make any sense. While we're on the subject, let's talk about Dom's little bro, Jacob. Yeah, we don't really know that much about him. We know why he hates Dom specifically, but the movie never goes out of its way to explain why he's trying to take over the world. Like, what's his motivation? Did he just wake up one day and was like, sure, I'll take over the world? Why not? I can't get invested in this character because I feel like I know almost nothing about him except for his backstory. John Cena does an okay performance, don't get me wrong, but he just felt like such a nothing villain, whose only purpose was to create a personal foil for Dom, but nothing else beyond that, making his overall impact feel painfully diminished. From a performance standpoint, everyone is doing fine, particularly Tyrese Gibson and Ludacris as Roman and Tej. Those two were a major highlight in this film. They're paired up for most of the movie, which was a wise decision because their banter was one of the most enjoyable aspects of Fast 9, and many of their jokes actually hit. And I found it really hard to get invested in many of the other characters because many of them feel really underutilized. There's even a new character who is introduced with the sole purpose of being the key to unlocking the MacGuffin that everyone is after, and that's it. It really felt like the filmmakers just didn't really know what to do with these characters because many of them just kind of end up hanging around and not really doing much, which was really disappointing because I like those characters a lot. The character arcs in this movie feel really rushed and pretty much all of them come to a really anticlimactic end, and they don't even feel complete in a sense, which I think may have been intentional. I say that because in a lot of ways this movie feels like a setup movie for Fast and Furious 10, which is really disappointing, and you can really see it in the film's second act. The second act really drags because it's just a series of elaborate exposition scenes and flashbacks that are used to explain why Han is magically back and what this device that everyone is looking for is, and then there's even more flashbacks showing us John Cena and Vin Diesel as kids, and it just becomes really repetitive and boring. The best way I can describe Fast and Furious 9 is that it feels like a filler chapter in a franchise that did not need a filler chapter at all. It didn't need to be a setup for the next film. All it had to do was give us some cool fight scenes and car chases, which Justin Lin is good at delivering. But in trying so hard to set up the next movie, it just feels so unsatisfying and unresolved. This movie isn't a complete and total disaster. As a production, it's mostly very competently helmed, even when the action is at its most ridiculous. There's a lot of CGI, but most of it's pretty good CGI, and the acting across the board is fine. There just really isn't a lot I liked about this movie, narratively, character-wise, or execution-wise, and it was boring. I never thought I would use that word to describe a Fast and Furious movie, but it was boring. I can see this being a film that will entertain a lot of people, and I wanted to be one of those people because I'm a fan of this franchise, but this one just didn't do it for me. It felt like a parody at times. This movie broke me. 4 out of 10. They went to space. So that was my review of F9. Thank you so much as always for watching. I do hope you enjoyed this video. But before I go though, I would just like to ask you guys, what did you think of F9? Did you think it was good? Did you think it was bad? Did you think it was somewhere in the middle? Please leave your thoughts down in the comments below, and I will indeed see you guys in the next one. Until next time, live long and prosper, and may the Force be with you. Always.